are talking about classic and new software. There's new software for the Next. Okay, great. So maybe you want to start to talk about your current project?
I've just finished one, yes. Well, I don't know whether anyone's seen it here today, but we were demonstrating Egghead 6 earlier. Simon had that on his laptop, so that was only finished yesterday. In fact, I spent about 3 hours debugging the +3 version just to figure out what was going wrong, and it was my fault, of course. It was a very stupid mistake. I'd left the interrupts running while I was doing all the memory initialization at the start of the game, so of course an interrupt happened when it was moving memory around, and of course it's switched the RAM banks in the interrupt, so screwed everything up. Yeah, so that Egghead 6, it's taken about 3 or 4 months to write. It's my own fault. I shouldn't have really volunteered for Chris, but when I saw the Crash Kickstarter, I thought, well, I've got to go and write a cover tape game for this, haven't I? You know, I wrote the Egghead games for Crash originally, so yeah, so Chris was happy, and yeah, I think we've managed to get the 100 people to pledge for that pretty quickly. Yeah, so what would you like to know about it? 88 screens, which took a long time to design. A lot of new code, a lot of new obstacles and enemies, and a lot of new features in it as well. Ropes. I've never written a rope routine before, and that took a bit of figuring out. I don't know if anyone else has tried writing games themselves here. There are probably 1 or 2 developers. I know Jason's. Yeah, oh, of course, yes. But yes, you have, yeah. But if you're trying to write something new and you go Googling for it on the web, oh, that is a pain, because it's always written in the most incomprehensible babble, as if they're trying to. The person who's written the article is trying to impress a university lecturer or something like that. So it's usually incomprehensible. So you just end up giving up and thinking, well, I can work this out myself. And so that's the way I went with the rope routine. But yeah, there's the teleporter, or should that be a shelliporter? This is an egg-based game, of course, lots of egg-based jokes. You'll be familiar with a few of those. I'm sure you've heard them all. Yeah. Yes, it fits in 48K. Although there is some fantastic music that Yeshmi's done again. He's done the title page music. So that goes in one of the RAM banks. So that's why I had to have all the memory paging in at the start. And obviously you have to make sure that the music that's running at the start is running in an interrupt. So you can't have that in a contended RAM bank. So that has to go in a certain RAM bank. And of course you also want that RAM bank for game data. So you have to switch things around and make sure the interrupts are turned off when you do all of that. And it is a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, it's 48K with 1 to 8K extras. It's got some AY ditties in there as well, about 30 or 40 of those. Yeah, and it'll work. It's got ULA Plus, it supports that. It'll also, I think, fingers crossed, support the ULA Next. But I haven't been able to test that, so I think I'll have to get Jim to have a look at that. Yeah, one thing I did discover with that was when I was trying to set up the palette with the port rights, I was testing it on SpecEmu, actually, and that was, whenever I tried to change the palettes, it was paging in another ROM, so I don't know what SpecEmu is emulating, but it was, yeah, the ports were conflicting with some other peripheral, I think, so I don't know what that was. Yeah, but yeah, it's got ULA Next support, ULA Plus supports. Well, ULA Next, I think Jim will tell you more about that, but it's obviously ULA Plus is the way that Andrew Owen came up with to give the Spectrum a 256 colour palette, so you can change the RGB settings for all the colours that the Spectrum uses, and basically it redesigns the sort of the attribute display ULA Next is along similar lines, but it's a bit more flexible. It does a lot more besides. So Jim will be able to tell you a bit more about that. Yes, so anything else? Well, probably for the same reason you came up with, really. I mean, it was just something that was easy to draw. I was just doodling away with my Sprite designer that I'd written myself years and years ago, and I thought, I can't do an egg. This dizzy already. People are going to think I'm copying that. So I went back to the drawing board and drew something else. Well, I did a big face with legs, yes. And, it's... Yeah, and it was just so easy to draw. It just came out again as an egg, so I thought, well, I'll go with it. And they're quite easy to animate as well. And it's just so nice to move little sort of character around. And of course, it fitted very well in the 16 by 16 pixel space which I had for the character. And of course, I was using coordinates to do all the sprite collision detection. So I really had to fill out as much of that 16 by 16 block as I could. Otherwise, the collision detection wouldn't have worked so well. Same logic. Yeah. So that's the reason for that. And that's also the reason why so many of the sprites are so big and fat and like that on a lot of the Egghead games, really. It was only in the later ones where I started to develop more sophisticated collision detection routines, which clip the corners, or in Egghead 6, this is actually pixel perfect. It checks every pixel now, which is the first time I've done that. So, the collision detection routines have moved on, I suppose. But that was the reason why it was an egg. Getting inspiration for sprites is always a problem, I find. Trying to think, well, what kind of patrolling nasties can I have in this one? What can I do this time? Let's start with a circle, or I'm not happy with that. Let's have a square. Let's make the square rotate. No, I've done that before. So you're always trying to find new ideas, and also ideas that will, again, fit the 16 by 16 block. No, you don't as well. That's another consideration. It's always good fun, though, I find, designing the sprites. And sometimes, you start with the sprites with a game. Sometimes you don't. You start with the code, but you get different styles of game when you start with the sprites, I find. I don't know. Right, well, initially it's going to be for the backers of the Crash Kickstarter, so I think we had 100 of those. But I think after that, then, there is a plan to get it out for anyone. In fact, I'll release a free version that anyone can download. But let's let the Crash backers get the first dibs on it first. And but as far as I'm concerned, anyone can play it and download it. And, just send me an email and I'll send you a copy. But keep that quiet. Just between you and sort of, 100 people or however many there are here.
It won't be
Egghead 6, any more questions on that? Or any other games? Well, Colour Clash is something that, you always have to work around, but it can be quite fun doing it. Both when you're designing the graphics, I know Jarrod's probably got as much to say about that as I have, probably a lot more, because he spent a lot more time designing graphics. But also when you're doing the programming and you're trying to come up with techniques that get around it. I mean, you may have noticed on the Egghead series, certainly from 2 onwards, I had all the sprites moving behind the blocks on the screen. So you'd walk behind lamps and vases and what have you. And that was done just to cut down on the colour clash. One problem with that method was that I had to have a 6K mask buffer screen. So that took up a whole 6K I couldn't use for anything else, other than maybe a few initialization routines at the start of the game, maybe a little intro. But that was just one little sort of workaround I found for that. But I think Jarrod's probably the person to ask about designing Colour Clash.
I'll try my best. Hi, everybody. I don't think I can be as interested as the other folks, especially following the likes of Rick and yourselves. So if you want, just blurt out the questions, and I'm trying to ramble on and think of something to say to you. At the moment, I'm working on contributing towards New Wonderful Dizzy, which I was quite happy to be asked to do work on it, considering I'm probably partially blamed for destroying the Dizzy franchise with Crystal Kingdom Dizzy back in the day. It wasn't very well received, and I was never 100% happy with the graphics, which were never supposed to have been the final tile set. Back in the day, I actually asked for an extra week to finish off and improve the graphics, and unfortunately gone through to duplication. You may find online a altered version that I did in 2009. That was a way to say sorry for what I did. I'm also being pushed towards doing 256 colour graphics by somebody. I don't know. Originally, I suppose you've seen the Donkey Kong demo on the Next online. That was born from an idea of, back in '83, I had my Sinclair Spectrum as a Christmas present. One of the first games I had was Ocean's Kong. I thoroughly enjoyed that, but it was never anything quite like playing the arcade machine. Then, obviously, a number of years later, they did an official release, which again was much better, but not quite as good. And I just sat back one day and I started to get into doing Timex mode graphics. I've never moved away from Sinclair graphics. When I finished doing Crystal Kingdom Dizzy, I started doing a couple of Commodore 64 tiles, one in particular with a guy called Zach Townsend that never came out. And I was supposed to move over to Amiga and Mega Drive games, and we were going to do a game called Fists of Fury, which we were waiting for a license from the Bruce Lee Foundation. It never came off. And it was at that point I decided, you know what, it's not for me anymore, it's not Spectrum. You know, I'd had the machine in '83, I'd always wanted to work on a couple of games, and I did that, and I was quite happy with it. But over the years, I've continued to tinker with the graphics, draw stuff. If anybody ever asks for something, I can never say no, and sometimes I take on too much, and I'm not getting through it as quickly as possible. So we started off, like I say, I started getting to doing Timex modes, after doing working with Eno Sorkus, using some of his Bifrost engine and his Nirvana engine. And I posted a couple of pictures online, which you saw. And the Next was coming along, and it was going to have the Timex modes. And like I said, I'd never gone into multicolour, really. And I bulked it going into Timex because it kind of didn't feel like true Spectrum. I like the clash, I like the restrictions, I like to see what I can pull off with a minimal amount of animation, because you've always got memories as a constraint. But now I thought I'd give it a go. You liked it, and then it was coming along, and then Jim was, we're doing 256 colour mode. Do you fancy redrawing it? No. Go on then. So I did, and then unfortunately, I mean, the Mario Sprite was a Mario Sprite that's never been drawn before, but unfortunately, it still looked like Mario. So, although Kong looks not particularly like Kong, it's my own version of Kong, my style. But so it had to change and went into Baggers on Ladders. Somebody sort of thought that the Sprite with a beard and long hair was Jim. No, joking aside. So that's the kind of thing I'm doing at the moment. There's some other projects on the sideline. I'm supposed to be doing a NES title, or helping out with one, which I haven't actually got round to yet. There's a couple of other titles in the pipeline, but unfortunately I can't talk about those ones because the licensing, the person doesn't want to reveal what it's a secret to and who the original programmer was, do they? Graham doesn't want to release that, does he, just yet? So I can't talk about that. And then there's a couple of other ideas for updating Big Baps. Yeah, and then some kind of amusement, fun park update as well. So, but yeah, so my background is, spec in 83, love to draw on it. I used to spend hours looking at the screen, trying to recreate the animations that were seen in front of me. And back in those days, believe it or not, using OCP Art Studio, I used to draw using cursor keys. I hadn't got a mouse, didn't use a joystick, I used cursor keys. I drew pictures with cursor keys, which was an absolute pain. Then I've sort of moved into... I don't know, I mean, you had the Daytel mouse that you could have used that came along with it. Yeah, I mean, Daytel was a local company to me as well. Yeah, well, eventually that was what I moved over to, which actually I found it more difficult to do spectrum graphics on, because I got to keep in mind where my colour boundaries were all the time. With the 64, I didn't have to. With the Amstrad, I didn't have to. You got a 16 colour palette in front of you in the ST, you got your 64 palette or your Amstrad palette, you had fat pixel mode, away you went. But no, we're not with the Spectrum. I had to really watch what I was doing. I didn't really pull off stuff the way I liked it. So, but yeah, and then getting into graphics as commercially, briefly, was through a local video game shop called Microcenter, which later became Software Superstores. Got to know lads that worked in there, the guy that owned it, Dennis Mulliner, who became a friend, still a good friend. He designed a number of games. I think he started off with stuff like, he did UCM, he did the original design brief for Turbo the Tortoise, Butch Hard Guy. There's a number of titles, and there's a couple of programmers in-house, and I got into it that way. So that's just a sort of brief potted history of mine, anyway. More so, but he never left. I mean, even though I left the Spectrum behind and I left doing graphics behind, and I went into, after years of playing Trash Man, I went into waste management. Yeah, and believe me, working on the bins, it is true. You do get bitten by dogs. You do get run over by children on bikes. It happens. You do get bribed to take things away, and you do get offered things as well, which with children in the place I won't talk about. Yeah, it's surprisingly true to life. But I went into waste management. I ended up, and then ended up working bizarrely in environmental crime. So that was my sort of career. But I've always kept up the Spectrum side. It's never left me. And with the tools we've got now, ZX paintbrush and whatever, it's true. It's just amazing. I mean, I can spend a few hours in the morning when I'm supposed to be working, just doodling away, depending how busy it gets. And no, I mean, I can't move away from Spectrum. I just can't. I can't move on to other platforms. I mean, I admit it, I'm doing the 256 colour stuff, and it's still for a Spectrum. But I still going back to the core colour clash. That for me is the be all and end all. I mean, I'm any next projects that come along, I'd love to do. But yeah, no, colour clash is king for me. It really is. I don't know if anybody wants to chuck another question before I pass the mic. No? Great stuff. No, I'm like I say, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I mean, when you asked and you turned around and said how you wanted him dressed. I mean, this is a sprite that's 8 frames of animation. Yeah. Jumping and all that, walking, jumping, rolling, facing forward, turning round, pick. He's got to have a bag. So I've got to take the original stock sprites and added like almost a fedora and a backpack to him, which I did in a couple of days. But I wouldn't have been able to do it that quick back then. You know what I mean? The tools I got now was like a ZX paintbrush, and I use a program called Piskel as well, which is a free online editor, which is great just to see things animating. Yeah, hat in a bag, 8 directions. It is, it did. But I was surprised how quickly I did it. I mean, it was literally, I had the idea, well, you know, you sent me through the 16-bit versions. I thought, right, here we go. So he walks backwards and forwards. He's got a hat and he's got his rucksack, he's got his hat on. He jumps, spins, he turns around, picks up, climbs up stuff and all that kind. So yeah, it was a good challenge to revisit something I'd worked on before and taking that a little bit further, because when it came to doing the original Crystal Kingdom Desi, I was really restricted to what I can do. Dave wouldn't, there was changes I wanted to make with regards to Desi, and I'm not talking about the game mechanic that everybody hates. And I have to admit, not being a big Desi player beforehand, I didn't understand the mechanic, and I played it since, and yes, the old way was the better way. But I wanted to do things, as you was mentioning about passing things behind backgrounds to limit colour clash. I wanted on the Spectrum to bring him into daylight. That's what I mean. Admittedly, got to do it on the 64. So I want to try to do things with blue background and work that into the trees and things like that, which I was told no, because like yourselves, we had 4 to 5 weeks to do the entire game, and I got to do it on 3 versions. Dave was coding the Spectrum and the Amstrad, and Craig was doing the Commodore 64 version, where I had to hammer through. And you'll all hate me for this, but I had to do the Commodore 64 first, and then recolor it for the Amstrad, and then work those backgrounds back onto the Spectrum. So you got like Commodore 64 with its 3 base colours going to monochrome. Now, when we did Turbo the Tortoise, I thought to myself, right, I can take, you got 3 colours. If I take the middle colour out, so you got a light, mid-colour, dark colour, take that mid-colour out and put a stipple behind it, I can create a form of shading. Now on Turbo, that looked fine in monochrome. It worked quite well. Did it for Crystal Kingdom Desi, bloody awful. It just didn't work, and I didn't get a chance to fix it. That's why I tried to fix it the best I could, because I didn't have the source code. I tried to fix it best I could in 2009, and that was, believe it or not, using the Spectrum graphics editor tool, loading up the TZX file and hand drawing into the code. Seeing where, recognising where the colour tables were, that was the next. It was finding the backgrounds, that was easy. They were there in little 16 by 16 blocks. But Dave had done some weird kind of compression on the sprites, where half of it you could see, and half it was broken all over the place. I had to work backwards, and then reintroduce the new graphic, just overdrawing the code, which I managed to do, bizarrely. And then I found the colour tables, which allowed me to go back and do another little tweak, and then I did a new loading screen, because the other one was absolutely bloody terrible. Because again, I'd worked back from a Commodore 64 version, which it kind of looked all right, but didn't have time to change it on the Spectrum. So, you know. But I do like every and all opportunities to say, I've tried to improve my craft over the years with it. But how far can I push myself, and how good can I make it look? And with working on doing some of the sprites on Desi 8, which are looking quite good, and I've really chuffed at the opportunity to sort of lay that old ghost to rest, because I've carried that one for a few years, I can tell you. I really have. But I've been fortunate to do all the projects as well, which have been well accepted. I think the first one that really, and I'll let you have the mic in a minute, I'm just rattling on, was Good Salfia, bumping into you back in 2009 for the first time at Bite Back in Longton, which is local to me, when Joffa was extremely drunk. And then, Manchester, Urbis, yeah, I turned up, you were doing a game in a day. Yeah. And got some questions for you about your arcade game designer and things I was trying to do with it. And it was just basically, can you draw me some graphics? Right, yeah, okay. what we're doing. That looks like an ultimate game. I can go down that style, and that's something I will do as well, depending on the game I'm doing, is what we try and get it to look like. Are we trying to get something from the past? Can I make a game that looks like it fits in the past? Not always just a modern, modern graphics. So that started me off again and really got me into it, and that's when I started trying to get involved in the community a bit more, and just going around all the different sort of functions that were going on. And yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
And you did a very good job on the homebrew.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was sort of we called it a bastard son of piston jetpack, didn't we?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, well,
there was a bit of jetpack in it and maybe a bit of cookie.
Cookie, yeah, that was it. Not jetpack, sorry, yeah, cookie interest. And and people saying it looked like an ultimate title, which was the whole point of what I was trying to draw. But the thing I'll say about graphics is that the brief starts you off, and then sometimes your design then influences the game, I think, which it did with Homebrew a bit, and it's done with other titles such as Pets vs. Aliens and Snake Escape and what have you. And there's this sort of back and forth between you and the programmer, and how it evolves. So the programmer influences what you draw something that then influences the program to move in a different direction. I think that dynamic is what I really enjoy as well. Yeah. Jim.
Right, what was the question? So, do you want new games, old games, what?
It's just that you are very active. We can read a lot about you on Facebook, for example.
Yeah, a lot of people know about me anyway on Facebook. I've been in the games industry for 32 years now. Started out on the Specky. Well, started in the games industry on the Specky. Started out programming on the ZX81, making games on there. And the Spectrum was like a big part of, obviously, childhood as well, because like, you have that, and then you play the games, and then well, not everyone can make the games, but when you can make the games, you play the games and you make the games, and it's sort of it's quite magical. Like I love creating games, and it's why I'm still a programmer rather than like a company director, although I am a company director, but I still am a sole like developer. What I love is making games, and it's what keeps me going. It's part of who I am, and the Spectrum was my entry point into the industry, and it's what I mainly grew up with, and I think that's why it's got such a hold with a lot of you as well. It's like part of your childhood. The games that we played, we've all got good memories of the games, and it's like a thing that keeps you coming back to it. It's like a really warm, happy feeling, and that's why, probably why we're all here today anyway. And it was the start for me. I think it was the Spectrum was the start of the boom of the games industry for the UK. Definitely, it wasn't the Commodore 64, because obviously that was more American, and it was bigger out there. But the Spectrum, I think, was the biggest over here, and it was priced right. I was talking with Rick earlier. I think what Clive did was amazing, because he made it affordable for everybody in the UK. Doesn't matter what your background was, you had a good chance of being able to afford to get one. So it allowed everyone to be able to have a computer at home, enjoy playing games with their friends, and sharing games with their friends and stuff. And it was a really good thing for for Britain, basically, like, because you got your friends to like help play the games. Like, if you got stuck somewhere, you could go and chat with your friends, or like when you were making games, if you got stuck up with an idea, like, how can we make this? And you chat with your friends or your workmates, and it's sort of like a community type thing where all ideas. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just, I don't know. I've got really good feeling for the specky. It's what brings us all here. I don't know. It's just something about it. Anyway, my games, I've done shed loads. Like the first game I did on the Spectrum was Throne of Fire, and that was a Mike Singleton game, which was, like, for me, my break into the games industry was working on a game that was designed by Mike Singleton. Like, again, no pressure there. It was like the guy was a genius, and he pushed the boundaries on Spectrum games, and then here I am, my first job in the industry is making a game that was designed by him. So yeah, and then after that I went to Canvas and did games like Roadrunner and Street Sports Basketball, and then I moved to Special Effects and did a lot of games for Ocean. I think it was about 11 in total, between like Spectrum, Amstrad, and the Game Boy, the original Game Boy. And that was Guts, Batman Cape Crusader for the Amstrad, the Joffa did the Spectrum version, the Red Heat, Hudson Hawk, Midnight Resistance, Cabal, I can't remember what else, but loads. The Midnight Resistance and Cabal are probably the two games that I'm most famous for, because that people really enjoyed that. I'm doing Baggers on Ladders. I'm also, well, I say I'm doing Baggers on Ladders. All my projects at the moment for the Spectrum Next have been put on hold for the past 2 to 2.5 months, because I've been helping all the other old developers get back into doing Z80 and doing games on the Next, and giving them support with how to use the sprites, the layer 2, and all the extra bits of hardware and stuff. So I've put a limit on when I'm going to stop being totally helping everyone else, and in December I'm going to jump back onto doing my games, because obviously the games need to be finished by the end of January for when it comes out, because I've got Baggers on Ladders, I've got Quake Star, it started off as an idea to do something like Starquake, but obviously not. It was like a platform. We wanted a platformer, like, kind of style and playability of Starquake. Obviously not with the building the platforms and stuff, but that kind of, that same sprite size and the levels, platforms, and you have to go and do some puzzles, and you have to go get past baddies and stuff, and Simon Butler's been doing the artwork for that. Yeah, Simon Butler's been doing the artwork for that, and what else am I doing? And I'm also coming up with ideas for what I need to do for the tutorials to teach people to make a game from scratch. That's once the Spectrum Next is out at the end of January, I'm going to take a 2-week break because I'm absolutely knackered, and just chill. And then once I've done that, I'll then go on to doing the tutorials. I'll start off with Basic and make a couple of games with Basic, and then we'll jump on to doing some machine code and build up to make the full game from scratch in machine code. YouTube, it'll be YouTube, yeah. Yeah. It's the best way to do it, really. It's most accessible to everyone then. I've really, the past, I met Enrique last year in Play Blackpool. I was doing a talk and he came to the talk, and at the end of the talk he said, you might want to come to my talk as well. I said, what is it? And he's introducing the Spectrum Next. I said, okay. So I went to his talk, and basically at the end of it, he says, has there anyone got any questions? And I put my hand up and said, where can I get a dev kit? And he basically gave me a dev kit there and then, and we've been friends since. That was the first time I met him. And it ended up that I basically, when I got the dev kit, I added hardware sprites and scrolling with the Raspberry Pi add-on board. And the reason I added that was because with the Spectrum Next, when I wanted it to be something that would stay on the desk or whatever, and not put in the drawer like like other games devices that have come out. And so what I wanted was something that would be easily programmable. And let's face it, the Spectrum screen layout in machine code, if you're trying to write a sprite renderer that you haven't really, you might know a little bit of Z80, or you might not know a little bit of Z80. And to get your head around how to access, get a position on screen from an X and Y coordinate, to then draw a sprite on there and moving it around and masking it and anding it and ORing the data in, and just to get anything on and moving around at a fast rate. To do that from scratch is really hard to do. So my theory was, if I can make it easy for a newcomer to put a sprite on the screen and move it around and possibly move the screen around, then they've got more chance of sticking with it and getting the game finished and getting the same goal and feel like when I make games, the creation process is like, for me, it's what I really enjoy. Like when you get a game and it all starts coming together, and then at the end you've made your game and it goes out or wherever, or even if you don't sell it and you just keep it for yourself, you've actually got a game that you made, and it's a euphoric feeling. And I've thankfully been able to stay in the games industry and get this feel time and time again, getting these games out. So I would like for everyone else who gets the Next to be able to get that same feeling and actually make a game and get that wow, I've actually made a game. But if they had the difficulty of having to organise stuff on the screen the way we had to do back in the day, then the chances of them, again, like say, putting it in the drawer and forgetting about it because they've got stuck somewhere is going to be less, and so they're going to have a higher rate of making the game. And if there's more people making games, then it's better for the community, and it just all comes back on itself. So that's why I added the sprites and the hardware scrolling with the hardware, well, on the Raspberry Pi. And when I posted the videos, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" I mean, okay, some of them said, "But it's not as specky." But anyway, like I say, if I could get people being able to make a game, and having more people making games, and then if more people making games, then there'll be more people wanting a Spectrum, and then if there's more people wanting the Spectrum, then there'll be more developers coming to get the Spectrum as well, and it'll all be beneficial for the Spectrum community. So, in making it easier, it would. Lost where I am now. In making it easier, although it took the Spectrum look away from it in the fact that it's got more colours and everything out of the hardware, it's bright. It was what I I thought the next generation of the Spectrum would be, because they added it on they added a Raspberry Pi to it, and to call it the Next. And I thought, well, it's got to be like an upgrade. And so, like I said, adding the sprites, I thought was the logical reason, and making it easier for newcomers to program it. Again, which is probably why Enrique decided that one of the stretch goals would be me doing the tutorials to make people be able to program it. But yeah, again, I've lost where I'm going with this, but that's the reasoning behind adding all the bits, and hopefully everyone will enjoy it and get the same enjoyment out of using the Next as I've done with the Spectrum and pretty much all the machines that I've programmed on over the years. But I keep coming back to the Spectrum. It's really enjoyable to program on. And when I got the Next, that buzz and the excitement of being on the Spectrum is still there, and that's what I love about it. The manual's going really well. Phoebus is sort of in control of that and is organising that, and the whole community has come together really well, and they're doing a damn fine job of it. So it's going to look good, and they're going to get some nice cover artwork for it and everything, and it's going to. I'm really looking forward to that, and the case and the box and everything. It's the whole packet. I can't wait. What I really like about this Spectrum Next is we've even managed, I don't know how, but we've managed to get some Commodore 64 programmers really interested, and they've come and they're doing projects for the Spectrum Next, like Warhawk, which was done by a guy called Michael Ware. He's absolutely really loving doing the Spectrum Next programming, and considering he's a Commodore 64 guy, he'd probably get shot for for this. But yeah, it's what you're saying before with the question, like, do you enjoy? The enjoyment is definitely there with the Spectrum Next for me anyway, and a lot of developers that have used it. It's not too easy. No, with the technology that we've got now, we can make it too easy to do anything on it. But we've tried to keep it real so that it would be like what it would have been back then. There's still technical difficulties to get the most out. You've still got challenges, like as a programmer, to get the most out of it. If you want to get like the real top end, all the horsepower that it's got, if you want to get the full access to it, then you've still got to like challenge yourself to do it. But you can. Or you can go in at entry level and still make a game that is running quick.
I mean, from my point of view, the biggest fear for myself is somebody who's so entrenched in attributes and the old style of games. And when I did a game called, it's a couple of Ghost Castles, as we called them, with a friend of mine called Sean G, and we wanted to make something that looked like it came off the shelf in 1984, and it was that was a sort of cross between Sabre Wolf and Attic Attack, really. That's what I was going for, and then we kind of hit the mark. Is that I'm scared of the Next. From my point of view, is can I do it justice? Do you know what I mean? Well, as somebody so entrenched in the old style of graphics, I've always been fearful of moving over to more colourful stuff. I mean, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but I don't know if you'll like it. Do you know what I mean? And that's my biggest fear of the Next. It's nothing to do with the Next itself. It's can I do these new modes justice? Because the restrictions are off now. I've had like training wheels on me legs for years, and now I've kicked them off, and I can go for it. And I'm fearful. I just hope that people like what I do, and I hope I get a chance to do more stuff. But for me, when people get upset about the advancements in the Next, I just go back to how excited were we, I can't remember, did the report, if it was Sinclair user, of the Spectrum Loki, you know, that was talked to be an Amiga beater. Clive was saying that what's the point of getting 16-bit when you can just do the same with a 7 megahertz Z80 CPU, and the Loki, you know, was going to be a faster machine with better graphics and more colour. And for me, the Next is that evolution on from the Loki, that thing that we missed out on before Sinclair went down and ended up with that at Amstrad. And that's the thing that I think people need to remember about the Next is, you know, when you think of the Next, think of the Loki, think how you got excited when you saw the tech specs. It's that, you know, it's that natural evolution on for me. That scares me. I'm looking forward to it, but like I say, but that's just me. Yeah. But that's how I feel on the subject, anyway.
Well, although you're saying you're scared from it, you can still, even though like we've got all the 256 colours, you can still do it in old Spectrum way. Like with the with Warhawk, what would do it's like a perfect marriage of the new mode and the old mode. Like we've got the game with the really nice new graphics, and then at the side we've got a panel which is using all the old Spectrum colours. So and it looks really good. Yeah.
No. I get you completely what I'm saying. It's just a personal fear. Yeah, Can my graphics? I mean, I've seen some of Simon's stuff now. I'm thinking, bastards. Do you know what I mean? Because I look at these people. Although I had a brief, I mean, it was, you know, right at the end of the Spectrum's life, and I wish I could have done more and got to the state I'm comfortable with my art now and got it to that state back then. And I still look at people like Simon in complete awe at what they can produce. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it's like I've started doing something. I see Simon's graphic. I think, I'm gonna have to take it up a gear now. You know, he's just set a little benchmark. Yeah. And that's the thing I think I'm looking forward to with it. Yeah. As much as it scares me of going into lots of colours, but you know, you got to give it a go, haven't you? Because you got to move on.
Funny is you saying about upping the ante with everything, because when I was helping Mike Ware and he was watching Lampros do his side shooter scroller, and he was like, "Oh my God, that looks ace!" And then, we're going to need to up our ante now, make Warhawk better, and sort of like do every time they do something, Mike would like, right, I need to do this and add this, and it's I think that as well is people's minds and the creativeness, and that it's helping boost the games, and it's going to be ace. Oh, yeah. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. You've still got, but the thing is as well is when it comes down to graphics, although you've got better storage, the memory and larger memory, because the extra data required, you've still got that memory constraint, which I love about the Spectrum. So, you know, most of the stuff I ever drew was like, although we got like Desi himself with his 8 frames, which is a massive amount of, you know, to draw. For the most part, it was 2 or 4. I mean, 4 frames, you can get something relatively smooth. But even with wonderful Desi, I'm looking at trying to get stuff down to 3 and 2 frames, still trying to make it look as smooth as I can to save the program and memory. And that's the thing with the Next as well. For me as an artist, and I like restrictions, that's why I've always loved the Spectrum. Yeah. It's still there as well, and that, because you can't just go nuts and do like 16 frames and have everything so, you know, ridiculously smooth like you can on some web sort of pixel art games. Yeah. You know, they've really got an advantage there, and that's what you got with the Next. Again, you've got all this extra features, but you still got those restrictions, and that's Spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree with that. Like I say, I totally agree with that, and that's why I said earlier that we tried to keep it real in what the Spectrum could have been had it been produced, like with him saying the Loki. And you've still got challenges there to, like I said earlier, with being able to get the most out of it, there's still challenges to make you like appreciate what it was like back in the day, and yeah, it's
all good.
It's all good.
Yeah, I'm talking again. Well, that's things. I work at Staffs University, and we've got a massive games labs there. And when you try to explain to people, you know, when they want to go up to 4K resolutions and everything, because they're working on the Unreal Engine and everything, and you turn around and say, "Well, I draw sprites in 16 by 16." You know, my total screen size is 256 by 192, and look at what you can pull off, and they complain, or you can't quite do it, and that's why I've been asked to give a couple of talks about graphics from back in the day, just to give them a kick up the backside. It's just like, you know, get back, go work on an old platform then, or a new old platform. Get some restrictions behind you, but something make you think, tweak it. You know, what can you do just by moving a couple of pixels on a picture just to make it look that little bit better? This is what I do. I agonise over ages. I'll draw. I mean, when I send off, you know, a variation of a spider that they wanted for Wonderful Dizzy, there's 6. There's different eyes, there's different bodies, there's different leg movements. Some are 3 frames, some are 2 frames. There's mandibles, you know, a frog leaping about and other things. But I don't just do one. There's a screen full of slightly, yeah, 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 yeah. But with the frog, it was a simple thing of changing just the neck profile. Does he have a lip that juts out, or does it come straight down into the body as it moves? And it's like, I can't stop tinkering. You know, I draw one thing, then I think, oh, but what if I did that, but I like that as well. I tell you what, let's just draw a screen, do a load of variations, throw it up, say, right, choose what you want, and then somebody else can use the others.
Yeah, the point that Jim was making earlier, no, it was Jarrod, wasn't it? About being scared with the Next. I mean, the talk of 2 meg of RAM. I mean, how on earth do you fill 2 meg of RAM when you're used to programming in 40K? I mean, you know, I wrote a little version of Theme Park in 4K a few years back. You know, so I'm used to doing working with all these restrictions. I mean, some of us here will probably remember the 4K, well, the mini game programming competition where we had 4K to play with, and there were some really stunning entries for that. You know, across a range of 8-bit formats, people programming for insane machines like the Atari 2600, which doesn't even have any display RAM. You have to build it yourself every frame. I mean, people were creating some weird and wonderful games in this fantastically limited amount of space. So that was great. So I've no idea what on earth I'd do with 2 meg of RAM at the moment. That would need a different. I'd need to put a different head on, I think, and put my thinking cap on to come up with a game design for that, because that's what scares me at the moment, I think, about the Next. Just lump it all on Jarrod's shoulders, you know.
So I think the future is quite bright for the Spectrum. As you said, if there will be software, and there will be more people interested, and this will bring on Spectrum forward. So, but sadly, this event here has to end because the museum normally closes at 8. So, yeah, he's already gone. So. We have sadly also now to end this talk, but thank you a lot, Jim, Jarrod, and Jonathan, JJJ.